Okay, so this video is for first year students trying to understand how we apply chord progression rules to, in this case, jazz or pop or Broadway music. In determining key and understand what's going on. And there is a place in here where we will talk about a second year topic called Tritone Substitution and relate it to secondary German chords, not ones that are predominant, but ones that are substitute dominants. But anyhow, this is How High the Moon. It's a jazz standard, and I'll help you interpret some of these symbols because this is an old school book where they don't use the same standards for jazz symbols for chords. But it's a G major 7, and that percentage sign means do it again. And the dash means minor 7, right? And then it goes to a C7, which is the dominant chord. Next line, F major 7, right? And the the percentage sign means to do it again, what you did before. And then F dash 7 means minor 7, right? And then B flat, dominant 7. Third line, E flat major 7. And then A dash 7 is A minor 7 to D7. And then G minor 7, right? I guess I need to get that out of the way. And then we're here, it goes to an A minor 7 flat 5, which is a A half diminished, right? To a D7, right? With a flat 9, okay? And then here to the, and then another, that's a G major 7 right there. Hopefully we're still on the page, we can see that. Yep. Okay, and then we have another A minor 7, right? So it goes D7. And then we have a B minor 7. And we have a B flat dominant 7. And then to the A minor 7. Right? And then now, because it's going on, it's to a G major 7 and starting the phrase again, but at the end of it, it just goes to a G6, which is a 1 chord at the end, right? So it goes and then to here, right? Like, okay. So the big thing you want to know about interpreting jazz music like this, as opposed to classical with the keys and chord progressions and things like that, is that whereas if it was a Bach chorale or a Mozart piece, and this is actually really important, we would look at cadences first to determine what key we're in at a given time. And we can certainly do some of that here, but and then what's in the scale as well. Jazz, and then Broadway, its descendant, tends to float around into more unique places and is freer, both with mode mixture, changing from the major to the minor on the drop of a dime, and also they like to just pretend they're in a key briefly for just a second. In other words, instead of going like 1, 6, 4, 5, 1 or something like that, they'll go 1 and then they'll pretend they're in the key of 6, or they'll pretend they're in the key of 4 for just a little brief time. In classical music theory, we call that secondary dominance or secondary areas applied dominant chains and things like this. In jazz, they just use a strong chord progression down by fifths, 2-5, right? The supertonic going to the dominant. And I'll kind of show what I mean. So when we're looking at jazz, we just say, okay, overall this piece is in the key of G major. So this is a G major key signature, starts on G major 7, ends way over here on the G6. It's in the key of G major, okay? But internally, it can go all over the place. And the mechanism it does that with is to say the 2 and the 5, the 2 chord and the 5 chord in any given key. It pushes us there. 5 chord is the thing that actually pushes us there, but 5 chord dominants usually have an entourage chord or a chord announcing it, and that's the 2 chord. Okay, so jazz is about 2 5s and then sometimes 1s. So let's look at this. I'm in the key of G. I have a 1 chord, right? It's a 1. It's a major 7. That's nice. Okay, and it does it again, right? Now, what happens here is G minor 7 pops up. And in our ears, in the key of G major, right, something's wrong because that's not part of the G major key or scale, right? our ears tell us we've done something, I won't say wrong, but interesting. We've deviated from what we think reality is. And before you think, oh, we're just switched to G minor, whenever you see a minor chord like this, check and see if there's a dominant chord coming after it. And there is, right there. And this tells you what key we're in, okay? 5 chords. Apart from subtonic 7s, which are 5s of 3s in minor, okay? 5 chords are dominant 7s, and they always push us to the 1 chord. And that's what we learned from our chord progression charts and discussion, is that 5 likes to go to 1. So if this is 5, you should get good at calculating what 1 is. C is the 5 chord in the key of F, and look what's coming up. F right there. So we started in the key of G major, and temporarily this is going to shove us down a step. Okay, and these pieces can meander all over the place, and they have great fun with them. But if that's the case, then this is 5, and this is 2, because this is the minor sign right there, in the key of F major. And if you want to think pivot chord, you can say like, this is a modally borrowed 1. But I just think that what happens is you think you're going to be on the G chord, and then it flips and changes, right? 2, 5, 1 in the key of F major, okay? And that's for our second phrase, so the thing took us down there. Now look what happens when we arrive here. From here, it's kind of a sequence, right? And then it does the same thing. It should go to the A, but it goes to the A flat, and this has become an F minor chord, right? And again, because it's jazz, we say, is that a 2 chord? Does a 5 chord come after it? Yes, it does. There's my 2 chord. This is my 5 chord, and B flat is. Now you can kind of cheat in some of these things and look ahead, but you should get good at just calculating it, because sometimes they go 2, 5 and they never go to the 1, and then they go to a different 2, 5 and another 2, 5. This one's nice because it's laying it out for us. Okay, so 2 and 5, and this is 5 in the key of E flat. So 2 minor 7, 5, 7, and we've changed to the key of E flat. And, you know, if this was classical music, we'd say it was a sequential modulation, because this is repeated a step down, and that's kind of like a sequence. And there's my 1 right there. Okay, 1 major 7. Now, look what happens the very next thing. We get a 2 again, okay? Minor chord, just call it a 2 until we hear differently. And this is its 5. This is the 2 in the key of G major, and the 5 in the key of G major. So we've gone back to G major, and we went 2, 5. Because, you know, it's like, it's good to go wandering around, but we have to be home enough and intimate what's going on at home enough to make you go like, oh yeah, I remember where I came from, so this has meaning, okay? So this should be a 1 chord, but look, it's G minor 7. Now here's a case where you see this and you go like, is it a 2 chord? Well, there's no dominant that comes right after it. Maybe right there, right? But I think what happened is they said 2, 5, and then they said, psych, we're not going to hear, because we're in the middle of this, right? It's like love is far away, psych, 2, right? So they did a modally borrowed 1 minor 7 right there instead of the major 7, which would normally be for the key. And then it says, okay, now we're in the key of G minor. This is my 2, so I'm going to put myself in the key of G minor there suddenly. And this is my 2 half diminished 7. That's what minor 7 flat 5 is in the key of G minor, because in minor keys, 2s are half diminished. And although minor key 5 chords are dominant chords, if you go up and stack the 9th on it, it'll have a flat 9 because of the flat 6 in the key. So this is D, F sharp, A, and then C, and then it'll be an E flat, which is in G minor. So that's a hint to your ears that you are in a minor key. Now sometimes they'll do that and then they won't follow through on it, but often they do. Okay. In this case, it's going to go, psych, you thought we were in the key of G minor, but we're really in the key of G major, and this is my 1 major 7. It's a modal borrowing, but it's sort of a way to say, you thought we were going to 2, 5, 1 in major, psych. Now you thought 2, 5, 1 in minor, back. We actually meant major the whole time. Okay. So it's a feature of this piece that they mix those two things up. It's kind of like, cool, let's see what happens, right? Okay. This is 2, 5 again, just like here, in the key of G that comes afterwards, right? 2 and 5, and I'm in the key of G, right? Now, here's where we have to bump into second year theory, and I want to talk about that, but I'm just going to skip over that right now for the first years, okay? There's another 2-5 right here in the key of G, 2-5, right? Okay, and that's my 1 chord down here, okay? 1 major 7, and that starts the whole thing over again. I'm going to move up just a little bit so you can see that. Let's talk about this right now. Okay, so what's going on here? 2-5, it doesn't go to the 1. I told you sometimes that these 2-5s happen and they intimate or suggest a key, but then they don't land on the 1 chord, right? You can do it as a psych out. Sometimes they just say, that's enough, now we're going to move on to something else. This is the building block, though. There are some jazz improvisation teachers as well that say, don't even think about this, just improvise over that because it's going by too fast, right? But I always think in jazz, you got your 5 chord and you got the 2 that comes along with it. It's the entourage. It's the gang. Right? So we see here and we go like, it's a 2 chord probably, and this should be my 5 chord, and it is a dominant 7 chord. Now we moved on into second year territory. We're going to talk about this, okay? What would this be 2 of? This would be 2 of A, and look where we're coming to, A. So it's not a 1 chord here, but it's like 2 of the 2 chord. So this should be 5 of the 2 chord, right? So it really should be an E7, right? That's what we should be having right there. This should be going B minor 7, E7 to an A, 2-5-1, just like we've been doing. This is called tritone substitution. We've talked about it in class in second year, and we've talked about it, even mentioned it in first year. It's fine, but it's not a course of study. And here's what it is in short, and then I'll explain why. I'm just going to pull over here where we have more room. Okay. Tritone substitution is when you have a 5-7 chord going to a 1 or a 1 chord, like that. Instead of this, you can substitute a 5-7 that is a tritone away, right? That's an augmented 4th or diminished 5th away. So another dominant 7 chord, but one that's away. So in this case, E7 is the one we should have, right? And if you go an augmented 4th or a diminished 5th away, you'll be on A sharp or B flat. So this is the other chord we could use instead, okay? Think of it like mayonnaise and then mayonnaise with sriracha. They're both sauces, condiments for something or like some kind of sandwich or something you're gonna have, or a hamburger, right? But one is spicier than the other, okay? That's it, okay? Now, how do you calculate it? Well, get good at calculating tritones away from each other. Or notice that a tritone away from E is B flat, and B flat is a half step above the target chord it's going to. So I'll explain why this is in a minute, why it works mechanically. But if you want to get good at calculating tritone substitutes, you have to either calculate an augmented 4th or a diminished 5th interval away. For instance, if I have a G7, I can go to a C sharp 7. If I have a A7, then I can go to an E flat 7. Or you can do like D flat and, D sharp and stuff. It's whatever's comfortable for you, okay? But if you look and say, what is this going to? It's going to a C chord, and this is going to a D chord, right? Notice that the tritone substitute is a half step above that chord. So that's a quick way to calculate it, okay? Right, and that's what happens here. And it's really cool sound because it goes down by half steps. So we're here, and now we're gonna go 2 of there, right, of this incoming up A chord like this, right? And instead of going from here to here, we go, which would have been the E7, we go from here to down a half step into away from this chord, and then into the A minor 7, right? It's got a really cool sound, okay? That's it. Tritone substitution is when you have a 5 chord, a dominant chord here, like this, and it's going to a 1 chord, right? Or anything, it's going to its 1 chord, right? Like E would go to A, right? D would go to G, right? C would go to F, B flat would go to E flat, okay? Instead, you can use the dominant 7 chord, like the 5-7 chord dominant, right? Major, triad, minor, 7th. That's a tritone away from that instead. And it's an exotic flavored chord that will do the same job. The easy way to calculate it is to say, if this is my 5 and this is the one that I'm going to, I know it says 2, but that's local. 5 to 1, 5 to 1, right? 5 to 1. Instead, look at the 1, your target chord, and go up a half step. That's the same thing as a tritone away from your dominant chord there, and spell that chord instead. Okay? All right, I'm going to explain why that works now. Because if I'm going to build these 2 chords here, the E7 and the B flat 7. So the chord we wanted was E7, or it should have gone B flat, B7, E7, or B minor 7, E7 to A like that. Would have been a 2-5 of A right there. So E, G sharp, B, and D. And these 2 notes right here are the ones that push us to the next chord. We go from here, and these ones, and they go in and resolve. In this case, to a minor chord. If it's a major chord, it's even more distinct. Right? They're the notes that push us there, okay? This is my E7 chord. Now I'm going to build myself a B flat 7. B flat, D, F, A flat. These are the notes that push us there. It's the 3rd and the 7th. Notice that this, I should change colors if I have my pens around. I do. Okay. Notice that this note right here is the same as that note there. They're in opposite positions, but they're the same. And G sharp and A flat are the same. Okay? And if we think of this as an E7 chord, then this is my flat 9, which is a nice extension. And this here is, what is this going to be? It's like a flat 5, right? So they're crunchy chords, right? You could think of it as a sharp 11, maybe, or something like that. Anyhow, they're just giving us altered jazzy extensions to that other chord there. So they both work. Sometimes you'll see them both like at the same time. One will do one and then the next one, right? But that's it. It works because the action notes inside the chord that pushes to its one chord are the same, although misspelled, right? And then the other notes are for flavor. It does the same work, okay? Last thing, and I'm not going to get into this very much, but if you understand about German chords, okay, you know that a German chord spelt on B flat would be B flat, D, F, and G sharp, which is the same thing as that. This is my German augmented 6 of scale degree of A. Not in the key of A, but if this is pretending to be a pseudo-dominant or it's a dominant sub, okay? Tritone substitution came from turning German chords into local dominant substitutes. They're spelled funny. We don't bother with that in jazz. We just spell it the normal way and call it a tritone substitution. We'll do another piece of music where there's a lot of this going on, and I'll deal with that more. But this was primarily for first years to say, look, I know my chord progressions. 2s like to go to 5s. How does that work in jazz? And it's everywhere. Okay, we look at that more than we look at cadences, because inside any given phrase, you can change key, right? Change key, right? Change key, substitute to the minor, substitute back to the major, right? And then come back eventually. So that's how we think about our soloing inside of that too. You use a scale that's appropriate to that, or a mode that fits the chord, but overall key. All right, there we go. I'm going to do another one of these, but it will be a much more difficult piece with lots of the tritone substitutes in it.